This person is Sentry, the strongest superhero in the history of Marvel. He can casually control high-speed bullets, and defend against all physical harm, and can even bend Captain America's shield with his bare hands. Even the knife Winter Soldier uses against Captain America can't harm him at all. The entire Avengers might not be able to match the Sentry at all. However, these are just a small part of his abilities. When the Sentry descends into the void, he can casually turn a living person into a dark shadow, and drag it into a void space where no one can see it. The entire New York is about to be consumed by him. How will the Thunderbolts respond? Marvel's latest return, Thunderbolts, is making a strong comeback in 2025. The second Black Widow, Yelina, worked for a mysterious and powerful government official, Valentina. Her task was simple. She received the time and location, and then went to clean up. She numbly killed one batch of targets after another. She had no goals and felt no joy. But she was indeed an excellent agent. As long as Yelina took action, there was no mission she couldn't complete. She quickly cleared the building and took what Valentina wanted. Then, she left behind a floor in ruins. On the other side, Valentina attempted to dominate the world through extreme measures but faced impeachment. The committee demanded that Valentina be permanently removed from her position, and Winter Soldier Bucky, as the newly appointed congressman, came to observe the impeachment hearing. Valentina currently served as the director of the CIA. She was also the chairman of the board of the Ox Group. Although she had completely divested from Ox since taking office, she still served as a board member in a strategic advisory role. Ox Group held a large stake in unregulated overseas laboratories. Rumors said that their research involved human experimentation, which were illegal operations to cultivate super soldiers. Valentina argued that these were just rumors. Currently, several hostile nations' technologies have far surpassed ours. The former president of the United States even turned into a crimson monster, almost destroying the entire city. Now the Avengers won't come swooping down, and we have no reliable heroes left. That was why Valentina had taken on the heavy responsibility herself. She was determined to protect American citizens at all costs. Her actions in the Ox Group and the CIA had always been aimed at this goal. The judge ignored Valentina's impassioned speech. Since you believe you have no issues, our committee will have to intervene with an investigation. Valentina outwardly welcomed the scrutiny at any time. In reality, as soon as the meeting ended, she instructed her assistant Melissa to quickly destroy any evidence of her previous shady experiments and missions. Any records that could potentially lead to Valentina being impeached or imprisoned must be erased. She then asked her assistant if the new missions had all been dispatched. Melissa honestly replied that there was still one agent who hadn't been positioned, and that agent was Yelina. At this moment, she arrived at her single father's apartment. They hadn't seen each other for a full year. Yelina came to tell her dad that she planned to resign. To be honest, she was tired of serving Valentina. Moreover, Yelina found it hard to move past the shadow of Natasha's death. Her father, Alexei, had once been a Red Guardian. He deeply missed the days of serving his country as a hero. So he completely failed to understand Yelina's feelings. Instead, he believed she should follow Natasha's footsteps and continue to protect the people of this country. Since her dad thought this way, Yelina decided to call Valentina. She expressed that after she completed this mission, she wanted to switch to a job that would put her in the public eye. Valentina replied, "Of course, no problem. I'm happy to promote women." As long as Yelina completed Ox's final mission, she could have her wish. Soon after, Yelina arrived at a secret underground warehouse. It stored the most sensitive assets of the Ox Group. But recently, Valentina received news that a group of unidentified individuals wanted to break in and steal something. Yelina's task was to assess the stolen items and kill the intruders on the spot. The building was filled with a large amount of documents. Just as Yelina was examining things closely, the U.S. agent Walker suddenly appeared and opened fire. Yelina lifted a safe to block the bullets. She questioned Walker about what was going on. The latter replied that she was his target for this mission. The two began to fight fiercely in the basement. Walker advanced step by step, but suddenly Taskmaster appeared. However, her mission was to deal with the U.S. agent, and posed no threat to Yelina. Before they could exchange a few blows, Ghost also showed up to join the fray. A chaotic brawl broke out completely. The four were focused on dealing with their respective targets. No one noticed that they had accidentally opened a secret experimental box. At this moment, Walker successfully subdued Yelina. The Taskmaster also swung hard and threw Ghost aside. She drew an arrow, ready to shoot Walker. Unexpectedly, Ghost suddenly dashed over and shot the Taskmaster in the forehead. Then, an experimental subject crawled out of the box, attempting to escape. However, all the doors in the basement closed shut.
Oh, no. I'm Bob.
Bob was probably the only successful subject in Valentina's Sentry program, but everyone was unaware of this at the moment. Valentina's design in bringing everyone here was to make them kill each other. After all, these agents knew all her secrets. Only the dead wouldn't talk. Yelina was the first to react and explain to the others, "We've fallen into Valentina's trap." Walker, upon hearing this, still refused to believe it. "I'm the next Captain America, and I'm not on the same level as you cheap mercenaries. How could Valentina possibly want to eliminate me?" The group was engrossed in heated discussion. Walker knew all about Yelina and the others. Where did Bob even come from? Bob had no idea how he got in. Ghost had no time to waste here, and planned to find a way to escape the basement. At this moment, a piercing interference sound suddenly rang overhead, then her powers lost their effect, and she could no longer phase through walls. This was clearly prepared by Valentina specifically for Ghost. At this time, she was mingling with political elites and business magnates, toasting and chatting. Bucky seized the opportunity to approach Melissa. He hoped she would consider handing over evidence of Valentina's crimes. Bucky didn't offer much explanation. Because his past was the most powerful explanation, Melissa didn't provide a clear response. She only quoted a famous saying by Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, "We can only understand life by looking back, but we must live forward." Then Bucky pulled away a committee member, hoping to gain authority for himself. Only by forming a brand new rapid response team could they possibly contend with Valentina's power. But the congressman acted conservatively. He still wanted to gather evidence and use legal procedures to take down the enemy. At this moment, Melissa found Valentina to report that all the test subjects had entered the trap. Next, they could initiate the incineration process. In the basement, Ghost and Walker were dividing the Taskmaster's equipment. Yelina asked them if they could show some respect. "People are dead, and you still want to steal things?" Just as she finished speaking, an alarm sounded in the room. Yelina realized this meant the self-destruct sequence had been activated. They had to quickly find a way to escape. Ghost was the only one who could phase through walls. Although there were special sonic devices in place, the device surely had an independent power source. Sure enough, they quickly discovered the hidden wiring. Walker tightened his grip on the shield and smashed it. As soon as the sound waves ceased, Ghost immediately left. But she didn't immediately open the door. The self-destruct countdown was about to finish. Yelina shut her eyes, waiting for the flames to come. At the critical moment, Ghost finally opened the door. The group successfully escaped just before the explosion. Unfortunately, all evidence related to the Sentry program was destroyed in the fire. Yelina was also knocked unconscious by the strong shockwave. During her unconsciousness, she dreamed of her childhood days in the Red Room. At that time, she had to betray her best friend, which led to the friend's brutal murder. Just as Yelina was about to lose herself, Bob suddenly appeared in her dream. Yelina instantly woke up from the illusion. She saw Bob holding her hand. The atmosphere between them became somewhat awkward. Ghost explained that someone had cut the elevator's power. "We have no way to leave this place." Walker had to believe that they had fallen into Valentina's trap. Meanwhile, Melissa learned that the plan had failed, and informed Valentina of the news. "Those agents might team up against you next." Valentina scoffed at this. "These superpowered individuals are just defective products. Even if they band together, they're still a pile of garbage and not to be feared." Melissa then showed her boss the live surveillance footage. Besides the 4 agents originally planned, there is an unfamiliar face in the basement. Unexpectedly, Valentina didn't recognize Bob either. She ordered Melissa to investigate this person's identity immediately, and to contact Warden Holt as soon as possible. After they spoke, the two hurriedly left the luxury car. They had no idea that the driver was Alexei. On the other side, Walker was also troubled by Bob's identity. But Bob repeatedly assured him that he only remembered drawing blood for some medical research, and then I woke up here. Because Walker's attitude was unfriendly, Bob couldn't help but retort, "Someone like you wants to be Captain America." As soon as he finished speaking, Walker grabbed his neck and pinned Bob against the wall. Then he noticed that the other person's pupils were faintly glowing. At this moment, Yelina came over to pull the two apart. This caused Walker not to see clearly. Yelina told Bob that even though Walker was a jerk, we must stick together if we want to escape this hellhole. But Bob said, "I'm just a burden, so you guys don't need to worry about me." Yelina realized that Bob was filled with self-loathing and depression, just like her. They were both walking on the edge of the dark side. One misstep could lead them into the abyss. They hit it off and found they had much in common. Meanwhile, Walker had broken through the wall and created an exit. Yelina convinced Bob to leave with them. The problem was that this route was straight up, and none of the 4 present could fly. Walker patted his chest, saying, "It's just a small thing, leave it to me." he jumped and disappeared at the end of the pipe. In less than 3 seconds, he suddenly fell back down. This height couldn't be solved just by jumping ability. Finally, it was Bob who came up with an idea. They could climb up the pipe back to back. But everyone disliked this position, so they climbed with great effort, just wanting to escape quickly. Meanwhile, Bucky was eating a hot dog while reviewing documents. He accidentally got his metal arm dirty, and had to take it off to clean it. During this time, Melissa finally called Bucky. She bluntly stated, "You don't understand what kind of person my boss is. And a newly appointed congressman with a suspended Winter Soldier identity can't guarantee my safety. If you really want to know something, use your abilities to check my phone." Melissa hung up after saying this, because Valentina was approaching. At this moment, Melissa received information about Bob. Unexpectedly, this person was related to the Sentry program. Bob's real name is Robert Reynolds, the Sentry from the original comics. In the original storyline, Robert accidentally ingested a secret formula created by a professor. This granted him energy from another universe. However, this energy gave rise to a negative persona known as the Void. To protect humanity from the threat of the Void, Robert had to erase all related memories. This may be why he now believes his name is Bob. Meanwhile, Yelina and the others finally climbed to the top of the tunnel, but they faced a tricky problem. How to climb up now? If one person broke this awkward position, the other 3 would fall before they could come up with a solution. Bob suddenly felt like sneezing. If he sneezed now, all their efforts would be in vain. This unexpected action actually helped them climb up to the shore successfully. Walker was about to reach out to pull Bob up, but the physical contact caused him to fall into an illusion. In the vision, Walker sat despondently beside a crib, seriously staring at his phone. At this moment, he had just been announced as Captain America. The internet was filled with slander and insults. Walker's value as a person was completely denied. In a critical moment, Yelina called him back to reality. Walker then realized he had been standing on the edge of the well. At this moment, blinding light shone from outside the door. Valentina's men had already surrounded the area. Yelina believed the numbers were uneven. "Why don't we create an explosion first? The strike team would definitely turn on their night vision goggles to see clearly." At that time, Yelina could take advantage of the chaos to blind them. Then Walker could make a surprise attack. As for Ghost, she needed to find a vehicle. Bob, having not shown any abilities, could just follow behind Yelina. The outside strike team was led by Warden Holt. He had already dug the trenches and set up defenses all around, but Valentina insisted on a non-lethal protocol to capture those individuals alive. Just as she finished speaking, an explosion sounded behind her. The warden immediately ordered Strike Team 4 to enter the building. Sure enough, they activated their night vision capabilities. At this point, Yelina could blind them all by turning on the lights. However, when the power was activated, the lights didn't come back on. Walker, not waiting for a signal, charged in immediately. By the time Yelina and the others arrived to check, the ground was already littered with bodies. It seemed that they would have to fight independently now. The strike team continuously fired smoke grenades, making the already dark room even more filled with smoke. Yelina concealed herself in the smoke and launched a surprise attack. To avoid any mishaps, she tied Bob to her back. Then she focused on dealing with the strike team members. Bob picked up a weapon and nervously opened fire. The two managed to clear out the enemies with great difficulty. Unexpectedly, a shadow appeared in front of them. Bob immediately opened fire in that direction. The next second, Walker's voice came through. Fortunately, he had his shield, otherwise, he would have been accidentally shot by Bob. Walker heard that the people outside had 60 seconds before they were fully mobilized. The three quickly changed into the strike team uniforms. Then they helped each other and left the base. After the recent explosion, there were casualties everywhere, so no one noticed their identities. Ghost also arrived just in time, driving an armored vehicle to pick them up. As the four were about to sneak into the vehicle and leave, they were stopped by patrolling soldiers ahead. Ghost immediately concealed herself, but the remaining three struggled to pass the identity check. In a critical moment, gunfire suddenly rang out from behind. Ghost dove into the back seat to see what was happening. It turned out Bob was out there with a machine gun, trying to divert their attention. The strike team immediately opened fire on Bob. Hundreds and thousands of bullets shot into his body. Valentina wanted to stop it, but it was too late. Walker thought Bob was doomed, and decided to drive away in the chaos. Unexpectedly, Bob quickly stood back up. His pupils glowed a light gold. He slowly ascended into the clouds. Yelina and the others also witnessed this spectacle. In the air, Bob gradually lost strength, and his body went limp as he fell towards the ground. He crashed into the ground, creating a deep crater. People within hundreds of meters were all knocked over. The armored vehicle carrying Yelina and the others was also overturned. The group crawled out of the wrecked vehicle and searched for some documents inside. They guessed that Bob was likely a product of human experimentation. 7 local media outlets had reported on the explosion. One of them had linked Ox to the incident. However, compared to the troublesome PR crisis, Valentina appeared very excited. The helicopter team was digging to retrieve Bob, who had crashed underground. She planned to assemble a new team of scientists to study this sentry thoroughly. Yelina instructed Melissa to quickly deal with them. These agents were the last piece of evidence and needed to be destroyed as soon as possible. At this point, the main characters had traveled all night and finally reached the nearby road. Yelina suddenly heard the sound of an engine and signaled the other two to lie down. As the vehicle approached, Yelina covered her face and let out an embarrassed sigh. Because the vehicle belonged to her father, Alexei. Sure enough, the next second, a big bearded man climbed out, excitedly greeting them. Alexei told his daughter that while he was working as a part-time driver, he overheard Valentina's plans. So as soon as he learned the location of the underground base, he drove over to provide support. Alexei crossed half of Oklahoma.
Oh, I forgot to tell you, don't drink from the big cup back there.
Alexei couldn't help but argue with his daughter for leaving without notice. The two behind them could only listen silently as Alexei rambled on. Valentina's men were already in pursuit. Moreover, Alexei's old car was about to give out. He pulled out a bottle of liquor, lit it on the lighter, and casually threw it at the armored vehicle behind them, but the flames were ineffective. Ghost wanted to slip out and disable their weapons. However, the vehicle was equipped with a sonic jammer, preventing Ghost's powers from fully manifesting. Yelina immediately leaned out and shot out the tire of one armored vehicle. But there were still 2 more following behind. In a critical moment, a very familiar suction cup suddenly stuck to the side of the armored vehicle. The next second, the entire vehicle was flipped over. As soon as Bucky appeared, the battle turned around instantly. He rode closer to the last armored vehicle. The gunner in the back was about to shoot. When Bucky snatched the weapon from his hands, he launched a suction cup to latch onto the tire, then jumped off the bike to grab the chain. With one hand, he pulled the entire vehicle down. Before Walker and the others could finish cheering, Bucky reached out and grabbed them. Meanwhile, Valentina arrived at the Avengers Tower. She went to visit Bob, who had just been relocated, and asked if he remembered what had happened before. Bob only wanted to know where Yelina had gone. However, Valentina said that the agents in the basement were just criminals. You are completely different from them. I know all your information, including your mother's mental illness and your juvenile criminal record. I know all of this very well. Valentina tried various methods to get close to him, but Bob had no desire to let anyone know these private details. The indoor lighting flickered due to his emotions. Valentina immediately changed the topic of conversation. I understand that you want to be accepted and recognized. Now the opportunity is right in front of you. She took Bob's hand, trying to persuade him to join her side. However, the next second, Valentina entered an illusion. It seemed that everyone who shook hands with Bob would see their darkest memories. Years ago, Valentina accidentally revealed her home address, which led to her father, who worked in security, being killed. It was because of her father's death that Valentina became hard-hearted. Bob was moved by her words and agreed to give it a try. She immediately instructed her assistant to prepare the serum and to hold a press conference. Melissa wanted to give her boss one last piece of advice. If the serum is injected into someone like Steve, he will become the most reliable Captain America, but if used on an unstable person, the consequences could be unpredictable. But Valentina was determined, and she wanted to showcase her research results to the world. Bob had been denied and belittled by various people throughout his life. Valentina offered him the recognition and encouragement he desired most, and soon, she had deceived Bob. At the same time, Yelina and the others were bound by Bucky in an abandoned gas station. The handcuffs on the 4 were carefully chosen by Bucky, based on their abilities. It wasn't easy for them to break free. Moreover, Yelina and the others didn't see the Winter Soldier as an enemy. Instead, they informed him about Bob's situation honestly. At first, Bucky didn't take the Sentry seriously. After all, he had seen many superpowered individuals. Melissa quickly called to inform Bucky that Valentina had completely lost control. The Sentry she captured was extremely dangerous. Now that Bucky and the group had a common goal, they set out together to stop Valentina. Although there was no trust between them, avoiding the problem would never solve it. The 5 of them rushed towards the Avengers Tower. On the way, Bucky talked to Alexei about the serum. The two joked that it was like skincare products. For example, Captain America used the original version. The Red Guardian used a knockoff. Bucky himself had been injected with Hydra's special serum. The Sentry, on the other hand, was an enhanced version of the super serum. Bucky's attacks were unplanned. He killed anyone who resisted. This also showed that Bucky's leadership style was completely different from Captain America's. Valentina knew that ordinary people couldn't stop them, so she activated the intercom, inviting the five to come upstairs. This familiar office had witnessed countless reunions of the Avengers. Now, however, it was occupied by Valentina. Bucky didn't want to waste time talking, and was about to make a move, when he found he couldn't get close. Valentina had decided to turn Bob into the world's most powerful hero. Now, reporters were rushing in from all directions. Bob would eliminate this group of reckless agents, right in front of them. At that time, the whole world would witness the power of the Sentry. This marked the beginning of a new era for superheroes. Bob punched Alexei away with a light wave of his hand. He made the bullets stagnate and rebound. Alexei got up and charged forward with a knife. But it seemed as if there was a barrier surrounding Bob. The knife couldn't hurt him at all. Bob casually threw Alexei aside and turned to bend Walker's shield. Bucky and Yelina found it difficult to approach Bob as well. The group together was no match for him, so they quickly fled. Valentina ordered Bob to chase them down and kill them, but he was unwilling to kill them. After all, Yelina and the others had saved him. Bob countered Valentina, "Didn't you say I was stronger than the entire Avengers combined? If I'm so powerful, why should I listen to you?" Bob grabbed Valentina by the throat. At this point, he was gradually being controlled by the persona of the Void. In a critical moment, Melissa struck Bob from behind. Although Melissa didn't agree with some of Valentina's decisions, she genuinely admired and respected the female leader. However, Bob quickly opened his eyes. On the other side, the Thunderbolts situation was more troublesome. They were already a group of troubled individuals with various psychological issues. After this failed mission, everyone began to self-loathe and blame each other. Yelina abandoned the group and left. Alexei hurried after her. Under the pressure of all these emotions, Yelina finally expressed her feelings. She had fallen into depression after losing Natasha. But her father had never reached out to her even once. Yelina felt that no one cared about her, and had lost the ability to feel happiness. At this moment, the relationship between father and daughter had somewhat eased. Just then, Alexei noticed that people in the street were looking up at the sky. They immediately walked over and found that Bob had completely transformed into pure black. The Void. Only two pinhole-like eyes emitted a faint glow. With a light wave of his hand, he could pull a living person into the Void. The Thunderbolts were rescuing residents throughout the city. Alexei lifted his daughter and jumped into the air to save people. Bucky was also doing his best to protect bystanders. Unexpectedly, a large rock suddenly fell from the sky. Fortunately, Walker appeared just in time to hold up the rock. The others rushed over to help. The onlookers applauded the heroes who saved them. However, the Void had already descended. Thick blackness was spreading throughout New York, yet Yelina didn't avoid the shadows. Instead, she stepped into the Void. She tried to confront her deepest fears, and find Bob hidden within the Void. But the tragic memories from the Red Room constantly disturbed Yelina's emotions. She noticed something was wrong with the mirror, so she immediately smashed it and fell into another space. Her drunken, despondent self sat in front of a bathtub, trying to drag the current Yelina into the abyss, but this time, she was resolute and finally had a goal to achieve. So Yelina was able to ignore the psychological interference, and successfully find Bob. At this moment, he was curled up in a tiny attic, afraid to go out. Bob had originally been a directionless addict. He had no courage to face the darkness, and Yelina wanted to give him that courage. The Void sensed Bob's inner turmoil, and immediately made the roof tilt towards Yelina. Even the curtains flew over to entangle the two around their necks. Fortunately, Ghost, Walker, and the others arrived in time to help cut the curtains. These individuals undoubtedly also faced their own pasts that they didn't want to confront. Fortunately, they all managed to overcome their inner demons and regroup. Bob led everyone in search of a way out. Along the way, they passed through many people's nightmare illusions. Finally, they arrived at Bob's nightmare room, where they saw the Void sitting on an operating table. The others were unable to overcome this shadow. Bob had to conquer his own inner demons to lead his companions out of here. However, the Void was far more powerful than an ordinary inner demon. It seemed Bob was about to sink back into the swamp and be consumed by the Void. Yelina disregarded the danger, broke free from her restraints and ran to Bob's side. Ghost and the others also rushed over. Together, they pulled Bob back into the light. After the Void was defeated, New York returned to normal. Bob forgot what had happened before. Perhaps he hadn't completely rid himself of the Void persona, but as long as he lived well, there would always be hope. Then Yelina and the others burst into the press conference. Valentina reluctantly announced that the Thunderbolts would become the new Avengers. The film ends here. Compared to Marvel's recent works, this one is quite commendable. The supporting characters around the protagonists can also take center stage in their own stories. Some reviews have said it very well. Who says the losers league can't spark brilliant moments? Sometimes, stains and flaws can transform into clumsy yet charming qualities. The director peeled back the rough exterior of the characters to reveal their tender undercurrents. It tells us that overcoming inner demons is harder than defeating villains. Saving oneself is more touching than saving the world.